It was supposed to be just another morning. Rick Carter, the owner of Benny's Grill and Diner, had built the place from scratch 15 years ago. Back then, he'd been flipping burgers himself, scrubbing floors after midnight, and learning names of every single customer who walked through the door. The place had soul. It had people. It had heart. But success did what it always does. More franchises, more distance. Now there were 7 Benny's locations across the state, and Rick spent more time in meetings and less time on tile floors, soaked in fryer oil. Somewhere along the way, he lost touch. Customers became data points. Employees became rows on a spreadsheet. That's why he decided to go undercover. No cameras, no gimmicks, just a hoodie, some faded jeans, and a fake name on a punch card. It was rainy that morning when he stepped into the original location. The very first Benny's, the one he opened with a dream and $47 left in his checking account. He pulled his Mo Caplo and walked in just as the 10 a.m. lull began. The smell of bacon grease and fresh toast wrapped around him like an old sweater. It felt good. He walked to the counter where 2 young cashiers, Lexi and Tina, their name tags read, stood talking between orders. He recognized neither of them. Maybe that was the first red flag. "Can I get the breakfast milk combo?" Rick asked, faking a tired voice. Lexi didn't even look up. "Sure, give me a sec." Tina was scrolling on her phone behind the counter. Lexi lazily rang up the order, eyes half-focused. "That's $9.50, she said, chewing gum like it was her. Full-time job. Rick handed over cash and took his number. He sat by the window, close enough to hear the girls talking, but far enough to stay invisible. What he heard next hit harder than a slap. "Did you hear about Angie?" Tina whispered, leaning over like a secret was worth telling. Lexi chuckled. "What now?" "She got fired last week. Said it was 'cause she reported kitchen safety violations to corporate." Rick's stomach dropped. Kitchen violations? Fired for reporting? That wasn't how he ran things. Or at least, that wasn't how it was supposed to be. Lexi scoffed. "Whatever. Angie was a snitch. She always thought she was better than us." "Yeah, but she was right," Tina said, voice low. "Those freezers leak water all the time. Kevin almost slipped last week. And the new guy burned his hand. Guess who got blamed for it?" They both laughed, the kind of laugh that covers up truth with cruelty. Rick sat frozen, his hands around the lukewarm coffee he hadn't touched. His eyes stayed on the window, but his ears were burning. "I'm just saying," Tina added, "if corporate actually cared, they'd fix the damn place instead of expanding it." "Please," Lexi said. "Corporate, they only care about their profit margins. I bet the owner doesn't even know we exist." Rick's sandwich arrived, dropped onto his table with zero eye contact. Just a plate and a muttered, "Here." He didn't touch it, didn't taste it. He sat there staring at the door to the kitchen. His kitchen. The same one he'd once painted with his own hands. The same one where he'd taught Angie, a single mother, how to flip a pancake without tearing it. And now, Angie was gone. Fired for doing the right thing. He took a breath. This wasn't going to be just a sandwich run. This was going to be a reckoning. Rick didn't leave right away. He sat there with his untouched sandwich and listened. The more they talked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just 2 bad hires. It was a rot. One that had started small, maybe with indifference, but had grown legs while he was off buying buildings and shaking hands. "So, what's the deal with the night manager?" Tina asked, stirring her iced coffee with a straw, like she had all the time in the world. Lexi snorted. "Creepy. Keeps watching the high school girls on their shifts. But he's tight with the regional guy, so no one says anything." Rick gritted his teeth. That's the thing about going undercover. You find out what people really think. But this was worse than complaints. This was about a system that had failed, and he was the damn architect. The bell over the door rang, and a young woman, with tired eyes and a stained apron, rushed in, hair still wet from the rain. Her name tag said, Maya. Rick watched closely. She didn't greet anyone, just clocked in, tied her apron, and grabbed a tray like her life depended on it. Tina rolled her eyes. Look who decided to show up. Bet she cried her way out of another warning, Lexi muttered. Single mums always get a pass, Tina said louder, not caring if Maya heard. Maya flinched but said nothing. She just lowered her eyes and kept working. Rick felt his blood simmer. That's when he stood up and walked to the counter. "Excuse me," he said, voice low and sharp. "Can I speak to the manager?" Lexi blinked, thrown off. Kevin's in the back. Tell him it's urgent." She shrugged and disappeared through the kitchen door. Tina narrowed her eyes. "You a health inspector or something?" Rick didn't answer. A moment later, a large man with a paper hat and an annoyed expression walked out. "Yeah?" Rick looked him dead in the eyes. "You Kevin?" "Who's asking?" Rick took off his cap slowly. "The guy who built this place." Silence dropped like a hammer. Tina paled. Kevin blinked. Lexi, coming back through the kitchen, almost tripped over herself. "You're Rick Carter?" Kevin asked, suddenly straightening his stained apron. "Yeah. And I've been sitting here for 20 minutes, listening to how broken my diner has become." Lexi opened her mouth, but Rick held up a hand. "Don't bother. I heard everything. About Angie, about the freezers, about the creep in charge after hours, and most of all, how little any of you seem to care." Tina tried to speak, but her words crumbled under the weight of his stare. Rick turned to Maya, who had frozen mid-step, eyes wide. "Hey," he said gently. "You okay?" She nodded, but it wasn't convincing. Rick saw the pain behind her smile, the kind of tired you don't sleep off. "Thank you for still showing up," he added. "You don't deserve what I just heard." Kevin scratched his head. "Look, Rick, we've been short-staffed, and I try to keep things running." "Save it," Rick cut in. "You'll have a meeting with HR this afternoon, and I suggest you tell them everything, because if I find out you fired Angie to protect yourself, or you let violations slide, you'll be out on your ass so fast your shoes will stay behind." The room was dead quiet. Rick looked at Lexi and Tina. This place doesn't run on sarcasm and apathy. It runs on effort and heart. If you can't bring either, clean out your lockers. Lexi's lip trembled. Tina looked down. Rick turned back to Maya. "You still got your break coming?" She nodded. "Good. Grab a seat. I owe you a sandwich." Maya hesitated before sitting down. She'd never spoken to the owner before. Not in person. Not even in emails. To her, Rick Carter had always been some distant figure with a $1 million smile on corporate posters and some generic motivational quote under his name. Now he was standing at her table, waving over a waitress and ordering 2 coffee refills and the best damn turkey melt in the house. She sat slowly, unsure what to do with her hands. "I didn't mean to cause a scene," Maya whispered, eyes flicking to the front counter where Lexi and Tina stood stiff and awkward. Rick shook his head. "You didn't." "They did. I'm just trying to keep my job," she said, voice cracking. Rick leaned in, hands clasped. "And that's exactly why I'm sitting here with you. People like you, who show up wet, tired, and still give a damn. You're the backbone. Not them." Maya looked like she might cry. The waitress brought the food, eyes darting between Maya and Rick. Everyone was whispering now. Customers, cooks, even the dishwasher peeked out from the back. "Tell me what's really been happening," Rick asked, calm but firm. "Not just what I overheard." Maya took a deep breath. "It started maybe 4 months ago. Kevin started cutting hours to meet budget goals. Said head office wanted better margins. Angie was the first to push back. She wrote an email to someone in corporate about the walk-in cooler leaking water and the stove burners sparking. A week later, she got blamed for a shift error and written up." Rick frowned. "And you?" I tried to stay quiet. "I have a 3-year-old at home, can't afford to lose the paycheck. But the late shift guy, Tony, he creeps out the younger girls. Stands too close. Tries to get them alone in the back. A few of them quit without saying anything. And Kevin, he brushes it off. Rick's fingers, curled into a fist on the table. I've worked through lunch breaks, done night cleanups even when it wasn't my turn. But every time I said something, Kevin told me I should be grateful I still had hours. Rick stared at his coffee. This place, his legacy, it had turned into everything he swore he'd never become, and it was on his watch. I'm sorry, he finally said. You should have been protected. Angie too. None of this should have happened. Maya looked away. That's just how it goes, right? People like me, we don't get heard. No, Rick said. Not anymore. He stood up, pulled out his phone, and made the call right there at the table. Linda, he said when his HR head picked up. We need an internal investigation. Starting now, Kevin's suspended. I want all previous complaints reopened, and I want Angie's termination reviewed today. Maya blinked in disbelief. Also, Rick continued, put Maya Gonzalez on the employee spotlight list. I want her promoted to lead server and her hours restored. She deserves better. He hung up, looked around the diner, and walked behind the counter. Customers stared as he grabbed a rag, sprayed down the counter, and started cleaning. Just like the old days. Lexi and Tina stood frozen. You two, Rick said, tossing the rag aside. Clock out. I'll call you when I decide if you're worth keeping. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. Authority came in silence, and he had enough of it to crush both their pride in one breath. They left in a hurry, and Rick turned to the cook line, calling out orders like he never left. The energy in the place shifted. People started moving faster. Smiles returned. Even the customers looked like they were part of something rare, a second chance unfolding right before their eyes. And Maya, she stood behind the counter now, wide-eyed, holding a fresh notepad and wearing a new kind of confidence on her face. For the first time in weeks, she smiled like she meant it. The diner had never felt so alive. For the next 2 hours, Rick ran, the line with a fire he hadn't felt in years. He flipped burgers, called out orders, cleared dishes, and refilled coffee mugs like he was 23 again, back when the place had only 4 booths and dreams bigger than the kitchen. The employees, left behind, quiet ones, steady ones, began to lift their heads. They weren't used to being noticed, but when Rick called them by name, when he thanked them for the work they'd been doing under the radar, something cracked open. Respect, it wasn't given, it was earned back. Rick sat down again later, wiping his hands with a towel when a woman walked through the door like a storm. It was Angie. Someone had tipped her off. Maybe Maya, maybe one of the cooks, but there she stood, red eyes and a folder in hand, her termination letter still tucked in the side. Rick stood up, heart pounding. She looked at him skeptical. This for real? You here to clean house or just polish it for the cameras? He gestured to the stool across from him. Sit. She didn't, so he spoke. You got fired for telling the truth. I read the file on the way over. They used a late register error to hang you, but you and I both know that wasn't the reason. She folded her arms. So what now? You say sorry and I go quietly. No, he said. I say sorry and then I ask you to come back. As general manager. That threw her. Rick pressed on. You always gave a damn. You fought for the team even when it wasn't convenient. I need that kind of fire. I need people who aren't afraid to tell the truth, even when it makes me uncomfortable. Angie finally sat slowly. And Kevin? Suspended. Under investigation. Probably won't set foot here again. And the girls who harassed Maya? Clocked out this morning. Still waiting to hear if they're salvageable. Angie shook, her head half smiling. You've got a mess on your hands. I know, Rick said, but I'm done pretending I can fix it from a boardroom. She looked around, noticed the shift in energy. Maya taking orders with her head high. The cook cracking jokes for the first time in weeks. Even the customers seemed part of the moment, sensing something rare had just happened. Rick leaned back and took a breath. I built this place to be different, he said, but I got distracted by expansions, by the numbers. I let the cracks grow. And now? Now, Rick said, I'm starting over, right here, with the people who never gave up, even when I did. Angie stared at him, then reached into her bag and tore the termination letter in half. Fine, she said, but I want new uniforms, better scheduling, and Tony gone before my first shift. Rick nodded. Done. She stood. Then I'll see you at 5 a.m. tomorrow. When she walked out, heads turned. The place felt it. A quiet shift back to something real. Rick sat for a moment, alone. The last sip of his coffee cold now. He had money. He had buildings. He even had a shiny seat on some national restaurant board. But today, he had his diner back, and that was worth more than all the franchises in the country.